Sir Roger. I rise to speak to new clause 109 in my name and that of Right Honourable and Honourable Friends. Also Amendment 86 and new clause 150 in the names of my honourable friends from South Belfast, Foyle and South Down. I will be very brief, Sir Roger, because I want to allow honourable members from Scotland, Wales and of course Northern Ireland to speak on these matters. Before I come on to the substantive point that I want to make in relation to my new clause, though, I would say, as a Member of Parliament representing an English constituency, that I hope my honourable friend from Feltham and Heston gets a chance to speak to her clause, new clause 168. In Merseyside and in Greater Manchester, we will have directly elected mayors in place by the end of this May, and my constituents in St Helens North, in Greater Manchester and the Liverpool City region, and indeed people across the northwest of England, will expect their views and their elected representatives to be taken into account as part of this process. Sir Roger, the Good Friday Agreement for me is at the heart of progress made in Northern Ireland and in relations between Britain and Ireland. The progress that has been made over the last number of decades has been forged by and through our common membership of the European Union. In speaking to this amendment and putting this amendment forward, I am of course cognisant that this is a debate in the context of the implications of a referendum held last May. I voted in this Parliament to hold a referendum. I took part in that campaign and I lost, and those of us who argued for a Remain vote lost, and I respect that, and I voted accordingly in this House last week, and I want to try and be constructive in working with the government to get the best possible Brexit that we can for my constituents and for the United Kingdom. But I also am cognisant of the fact that respect needs to be shown to another referendum, one which took place in 1998 in Northern Ireland in support of the Good Friday Agreement. On the same day, another referendum took place whereby Ireland withdrew its territorial claim over Northern Ireland, and that goes to the heart of the amendments in the names of my honourable friends from the Social Democratic and Labour Party. So the people of Northern Ireland by referendum have endorsed the Good Friday Agreement and its provision. Subsequent agreements have been made between the United Kingdom and Ireland governments, supported by the efforts of honourable friends, and I deliberately call them my honourable friends from all parties in Northern Ireland, of course.
Thank the honourable member for giving way, and with regards in particular to new clause 109, he's asking Her Majesty's government to commit to the principles that are enshrined in the various agreements. He accepts the government has committed to all of those principles, as indeed has Her Majesty's opposition. Right. Why does it need to be in this piece of legislation?
I think the uncertainty that's been caused by the vote to leave the European Union, the fact that the Good Friday Agreement was drafted, signed, and that all of the architecture around it is in the context of both the United Kingdom and Ireland being members of the European Union is an important point to bear in mind. I would also say gently to my honourable friend that people in Northern Ireland, like people in Scotland, voted to remain in the European Union, and while I'll cast my vote in this House on Article 50 based on the vote in the UK as a whole, I think it's worth bearing that in mind too. So I want to just very briefly look at some of the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement that I have identified that I would like the government commit to ensuring will remain in place and be upheld both in letter and spirit by the government when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. The first is the most practical and obvious one, which is the free movement of people, goods and services on the island of Ireland. Trade and tourism has increased. People much as across the United Kingdom and Ireland, and indeed the world, do not live their lives or in their communities on boundaries, and in truth there has been very little difference crossing between the boundary of my own local authority in St Helens to that of the local authority in Knowsley, as there has been crossing between the border, whether it's from Derry to Letterkenny or from Newry to Dundalk. I think the second point I want to make is on citizenship rights, and this is particularly and specifically in relation to Northern Ireland, but also my new clause 108, which was in the previous group, talks about the status, the rights and privileges of the Irish community here in Great Britain. As the chair of the all-party group on the Irish in Britain, I also would welcome from the government some assurance about the status of the Irish community here. Migration from Ireland has taken place prior to our simultaneously joining the European Union, and it would be good to know, notwithstanding the fact that of course Irish citizens will still be EU citizens after the UK leaves the EU, that their rights, status and entitlements that they've enjoyed through legislation, through custom and practice over the last century and for many centuries will be maintained. But this is also about the rights of people born in Northern Ireland to choose to be Irish or British or both. I choose to exercise them both. Some people choose to exercise exclusively one, but I think it's very important in that sense that those who wish to be Irish citizens, who will be EU citizens, who reside and who are born in Northern Ireland, are very much in the thought of the government as it negotiates our withdrawal from the European Union. The third point is around the preservation of institutions set up relating to strands 2 and 3 of the Good Friday Agreement. These are around the North-South Ministerial Council and North-South bodies. Now, North-South bodies are in areas like food safety, trade and business, inland waterways, the Ulster Scots and the Irish language, and of course on the special EU programmes body itself that was set up to distribute European Union funding. One would imagine that when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, that body in itself will cease to exist, which is a strand through body that has been set up by the Good Friday Agreement, which has been passed by a referendum and which is enshrined by acts in this House. On strands 3, I think it's crucially important that East-West relations between the United Kingdom and Ireland continue, but the new dynamic, of course, post-evolution of the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Assembly, the Scottish and Welsh governments, the role that they play in the British-Irish Council in fora like the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, it's absolutely critical that that engagement continues. And part of this, as I say, taking on board my honourable friend from Northampton's point, is that these have taken place in the context of our joint European Union, which has just made all of this so much easier, and I think that is an indisputable fact. One area that concerns me greatly in terms of the UK leaving the EU is around the Good Friday Agreement's provisions on human rights and equality. I think the mood music from the government around the Convention on Human Rights, which of course is separate and outside membership of the European Union, but nonetheless the intimation of the government that it would seek to somehow roll back or reverse some of the commitments given on human rights, both in terms of Northern Ireland in relation to this new clause, but also I think for people across the UK as a whole is worrying. On the principle of consent, as I previously...
On that point?
Yes, of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and does he agree with me that it would be very appropriate if the Minister tonight confirmed that the government is not going to leave the European Convention on Human Rights and the Council of Europe, because there are strong feelings on both sides of the House about leaving that and leaving our place in the world somewhat exposed, and it's very important that the Minister would give an undertaking tonight on that.
I thank my right honourable friend for her intervention. I agree entirely, and I pay tribute to her in the valuable and important work she does representing this place on the Council of Europe, and we're very lucky to have her in that position. On the principle of consent, having previously alluded to the Irish government withdrawing its territorial claim, there is now no dispute, and the Good Friday Agreement makes this clear by any of the parties in the Northern Ireland Executive or any parties in this House, that Northern Ireland will remain part of the United Kingdom until such times as the majority of people there decide otherwise. That is what is enshrined in the principle of consent, but it is for people in Northern Ireland and then the island of Ireland as a whole to exercise that. My slight concern is that Northern Ireland leaving the European Union is a constitutional change that is being done without the consent of people in Northern Ireland because they voted to remain. And again, it's something that I think just unsettles what has been a very delicate political balance that both governments, Labour and Conservative, have sought to protect. I think the new clause moved by the honourable members for Foyle, South Down and South Belfast go to the heart of this as well. There is no provision for a part of a country which leaves the EU rejoining the EU, and I think we need to be explicitly clear on that in respecting the principle of consent. And if the wishes of people in Northern Ireland change and they wish to join the United Ireland, provision is made for them to immediately become members of the European Union, having expressed their wish to join the rest of the island of Ireland in a union. And then finally, on the status of the Irish language, which is a full EU recognised language, and also in the Good Friday Agreement made particular reference to in terms of being a regional and minority language, it is very important that is maintained. So I have tried to be constructive in the amendment. I hope what I have said tonight is constructive. I have huge respect for honourable and right honourable friends from Northern Ireland. I understand we will have different views and aspects of this, but in doing so I seek to protect the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process, which I believe has given me and many people like me opportunities that otherwise we would not have had. Thank you.